Good afternoon. I'm Jenny Johnson, Vice Chair of the Virginia Waste Management Board. And in the absence of an elected chair, I would like to call this meeting of the Virginia Waste Management Board to order. At this time, I would like to introduce and welcome two new board members, Taylor Harvey and Joe Levine. Would you like to introduce yourselves or say anything? Joe?
It's an honor to be here. My name is Joe Levine. I'm with New River Resource Authority, and I look forward to serving.
Taylor?
I'm Taylor Harvey from Amelia. I'm happy to be here as well. I had 3 decades plus of local government experience in Amelia, plenty of experience with solid waste and those issues, back retired farming, and happy to have something else to think about, maybe to keep my brain a little sharper, but happy to be here.
All right, I'll let the rest of the board introduce themselves. I'll start with Kim to my left.
I'm Kim Hines, Executive Director for Central Virginia Waste Management Authority.
I'm Jenny Johnson, Director of the Waste and Recycling Division for LaBella Associates.
Dan Chesla with Republic Services.
Mike Rolban, Director DEQ.
Kate Kolbach with the Virginia Office of the Attorney General.
All right. So before we begin, I would like to remind everyone that this is a regular business meeting of the board, and conduct that interferes with an orderly and efficient meeting or interferes with the rights of others to speak to the board is prohibited. Now we will proceed with the agenda for the day. So the next item on the agenda is election of the chair. Are there any nominations?
Madam Vice, I'd like to nominate you, Ms. Jenny Johnson, for Chair of the Waste Board.
Second.
Okay.
Asking for one? Yes.
All in favor.
All in favor, thank you.
Oh. Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. So the next, since I was serving as vice chair, the next order of the agenda is to elect a vice chair. Do I hear any nominations? Dan Chesla? I nominate Dan Chesla.
Thank you. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great. All right. The next item is to review and approve the minutes from May 2nd of 2025. They're in the board packet, I'm sure.
Tab A of your packets.
Yep, just a minute. Get the technology.
Madam Chair, I move we approve the minutes.
Thank
of the
you.
last board
Do I have
meeting.
is there a second?
I'll second that.
Madam Chairman, if I could?
Yes.
Since I was not at that meeting, I'm going to abstain on this vote.
Okay.
It's okay?
I will abstain as well.
Then, all in favor?
Aye.
Excellent. I believe Director Rollband has an announcement he would like to make.
Yeah, I'd like to have Joe Levine come up for a second. Because I'm losing my voice where I gain it back. I'm not going to talk as much, but just wanted to recognize Joe for our VEEP award. It's the Virginia Environmental Excellence Program Award for his facility, New River Regional Solid Waste Management Facility. And I've got a whole list of all the great things he's done this year, but because of my voice, I'm not going to go through it all. But he gets a plaque, and he also gets a flag, so you get the flag. So, and part of this, I was going to do it personally at his facility. Things have not allowed me to get there, and since I don't know if I'll be here next year, I thought we'd give it to him at this meeting. Thanks. Thank you.
Congratulations.
That's the box.
All right, I got out of order.
Want to read our
All right, so now, oops, I believe some of us up here have disclosure statements that we must read. Serving as chair, I will go first. Set a good example, right? So I'm Jennifer Johnson. I submitted to the DEQ staff a signed transactional disclosure statement pursuant to the Virginia State and Local Government Conflict of Interests Act before voting on this agenda item. I have a potential personal interest affected by the transactions being considered because of my employment with Labella Associates. Labella Associates provides engineering and environmental services for solid waste facilities throughout the Commonwealth. I am able to participate in agenda item tabs E fairly, objectively, and in the public interest. Dan, you get to go next.
I have also submitted to DEQ staff a signed transactional disclosure statement pursuant to Virginia State and Local Government Conflicts of Interest Act before voting on this agenda item. I have a potential personal interest affected by the transactions being considered because of my employment with Republic Services. Republic Services is a national waste and recycling company that owns landfills and waste and recycling hauling companies throughout the Commonwealth. I am able to participate in agenda item E, tabs E, fairly, objectively, and in the public interest. Kim?
I'm Kim Hines. I also submitted to DEQ staff a signed transactional disclosure statement pursuant to the Virginia State and Local Government Conflict of Interest Act before voting on this agenda item. I have a potential personal interest affected by the transactions being considered because of my employment with the Central Virginia Waste Management Authority. Central Virginia Waste Management Authority is a public service authority that provides solid waste management planning and recycling and solid waste initiatives for 13 local governments. I am able to participate in agenda item tabs E fairly, objectively, and in the public interest.
And Joe.
I'm Joe Levine. I also submitted to DEQ staff a signed transactional disclosure statement pursuant to the Virginia State and Local Government Conflict of Interest Act before voting on this agenda item. I have a potential personal interest affected by the transactions being considered because of my employment by the New River Resource Authority. The New River Resource Authority provides solid waste services and owns and operates the New River Resource Authority landfill. I am able to participate in agenda item tabs E fairly, objectively, and in public interest.
Thank you. So now we shall move on to item number 4, which is the final exempt regulations, the annual update 2025, Virginia Hazardous Waste Management Regulations, 9 VAC 20-60. The DEQ is going to present.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the board. My name is Rebecca Rath. I am the Regulatory Analyst for the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality's Policy Division. Today, I will be presenting to you the final exempt regulatory action to amend the Virginia Hazardous Waste Management Regulations under 9 VAC 2060 of the Virginia Administrative Code. The purpose of this regulatory update is to bring Virginia's hazardous waste management regulations up to date with the Environmental Protection Agency's rules promulgated through July 1st, 2025. Excuse me. EPA's rulemaking, effective July 1st, 2025, made technical corrections and clarifications to specific provisions in 3 previous EPA hazardous waste rule amendments, specifically integrating e-manifest with hazardous waste exports and other manifest-related reports, PCB manifest amendments, and technical corrections. This is also known as the e-manifest third rule. This action makes technical corrections to fix typographical errors in the e-manifest and movement document regulations. This rule also changes how generator facilities will receive their returned manifests. Instead of a paper copy being mailed back, the manifest will be retrieved from the e-manifest portal on RCRA Info. The second rule is the phase down of hydrofluorocarbons, management of certain hydrofluorocarbons and substitutes under the American Innovation and Manufacturing Act of 2020. This action establishes alternative standards for ignitable spent refrigerants that are lower flammability hydrofluorocarbons when recycled for reuse. The third rule is the hazardous waste generator improvements rule, the hazardous waste pharmaceuticals rule, definition of solid waste rule, technical corrections. This action incorporates several technical corrections and typographical changes. This amendment updates Virginia hazardous waste management regulations in order to bring the citations up to date and incorporate the 2025 annual edition of Title 40 of the Code of Federal Regulations. This change updates the incorporated date of the CFR in 9 VAC 2060-18 from July 1st, 2024 to July 1st, 2025. This action qualifies as an exempt final regulatory action under Section A4 of the, I apologize. My apologies. Under the APA Section 4006, as this amendment is necessary in order to conform Virginia's regulations to changes in federal regulations. I'll pause now for any questions. My apologies.
Does anyone on the board have any questions?
No, ma'am.
If there are no further questions, I'll now move on to staff recommendation. Staff recommends that the board adopt Annual Update 2025 to 9 VAC 2060, authorize its publication, and affirm that the board will receive, consider, and respond to requests by any interested person at any time with respect to reconsideration or revision.
I'd like to ask for a motion to follow the staff recommendation.
Madam Chair, so moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. Oh, the next item will be the final exempt regulations. No, sorry. The final regulations implementation of Chapter 235 of the. No, it's back to the final regulations. I'm sorry. Final exempt regulations, I was correct in the first place. The annual update 2025 for the regulations governing the transportation of hazardous materials under 9 VAC 2110.
The next item I will present to you is the final exempt regulatory action to amend the Virginia regulations governing the transportation of hazardous materials under 9 VAC 2110 of the Virginia Administrative Code. The purpose of this regulatory update is to bring Virginia's regulations up to date with the Department of Transportation's rules promulgated through October 1st, 2025. Each year, the U.S. Department of Transportation makes several changes to the federal rules regarding the transportation of hazardous materials under Title 49 of the Code of Federal Regulations. Because Virginia's regulations incorporate the federal regulations with certain exceptions, it is necessary to bring Virginia's regulations up to date with the federal changes annually. We do this by updating the date of the incorporated 49 CFR, which is under Section 110 of this regulation. This update keeps our rules current with the federal requirements, and it enables the Virginia State Police to inspect and enforce the federal requirements for the transportation of hazardous materials. This action covers the federal rules adopted during the period between October 1st, 2024 through September 30th, 2025. For this regulatory action, the only change is to Section 110, which specifies the date of the federal regulations that are incorporated into Virginia's regulations. This date has been updated to October 1st, 2025 through this action. A summary of all of the federal rules that will be incorporated under this amendment has been provided to you in your board book. The Virginia State Police Motor Carrier Safety Unit has been notified of this regulatory amendment as they provide the compliance and enforcement of this regulation. Based on communication from the Virginia State Police, they agree with the proposed incorporation of these federal rules. Please note that no member of the Virginia State Police Motor Carrier Safety Unit could be in attendance today. Under the Administrative Process Act, this amendment is a final exempt action under subdivision A4C of section 4006, as the amendment is necessary in order to conform Virginia's regulations to changes in the federal regulations. I'll pause now for any questions.
Does the board have any questions? No questions.
With no further questions, I'll move on to staff recommendation. Staff recommends that the board adopt Annual Update 2025 to 9 VAC 2110, authorize its publication, and affirm that the board will receive, consider, and respond to requests by any interested person at any time with respect to reconsideration or revision.
Would anyone like to make a motion in support of staff recommendation?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Next up on our agenda are now the final regulations, the implementation of Chapter 235 of the 2024 Acts of Assembly, Senate Bill 342, the Solid Waste Management Regulations, 9 VAC 20-81.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the board. My name is Priscilla Rohr, and I'm the Solid Waste Compliance Coordinator for the DEQ Land Division. And today I'm presenting the final regulatory action titled Amendment in Response to Chapter 235 of the 2024 Virginia Acts of Assembly. This action would amend the Virginia Solid Waste Management Regulations under 9 VAC 2081 of the Virginia Administrative Code. During the 2024 Virginia General Assembly session, Senate Bill 342 was passed by both the House and the Senate and approved by the governor. This bill was codified as Chapter 235 of the 2024 Virginia Acts of Assembly, and this new law directs the Virginia Waste Management Board to amend Section 95 of the Virginia Solid Waste Management Regulations to allow for vegetative waste to be transported to another location for open burning if it's impractical or unsafe to destroy such waste on the premises of private property. So this final regulatory action is necessary to develop the regulatory language for that open burning exemption that's now required by the new law. The legal basis for this regulatory amendment is the Virginia Waste Management Act, Title 10.1, Chapter 14 of the Code of Virginia. Specifically, Section 10.1, 1402 authorizes the board to supervise and control waste management activities in the Commonwealth and to promulgate regulations necessary to carry out their powers and duties. As required by the new law, this regulatory amendment is establishing a new optional open burning exemption that is only applicable to vegetative waste. Vegetative waste is already defined under the solid waste management regulations, and it refers to materials from land clearing and yard maintenance such as brush, leaves, roots, stumps, and other clean wood waste. It doesn't include painted wood, treated wood, construction waste, household trash, or other materials. Under the existing solid waste management regulations, open burning of vegetative waste is already allowed, but only for certain purposes such as campfires, prescribed burns, highway maintenance, emergency cleanups, and some limited burning at permitted landfills. The existing regulations do allow for open burning of vegetative waste from land clearing and property maintenance, but it's only on site at the property where the brush came from. Otherwise, the existing regulations don't allow vegetative waste to be taken off-site and burned at another location, so it's necessary to amend the regulations to include that exemption to align with the new law that was passed. Please note that any open burning activities that are already allowed today under the existing regulations will carry forward and are not impacted by the new law or this regulatory action. As a reminder of how we got to where we are today, this is a full process regulatory amendment, and it does consist of a number of steps to get us to a full final regulation. This action initially began in 2024. Senate Bill 342 was approved March 28th of last year and codified as Chapter 235 of that 2024 Acts of Assembly. The law became effective July 1st, requiring the board to amend the regulations. A NOIRA, or Notice of Intended Regulatory Action, to amend the regulations was published last year in October, and a 30-day public comment period occurred ending November 20th. No comments were received. DEQ then convened a Regulatory Advisory Panel, or RAP, in February of this year to develop the language for the new open burning exemption, and the RAP did come to consensus on that criteria. Then on May 2nd of this year, the board approved that criteria as a proposed regulation, and the governor's office then approved it for public comment on July 22nd. It was published August 25th for a 60-day public comment period, and no public comments were received. So no changes were made to the regulatory language. We are carrying forward that same language as a final regulation for the board's review. For the benefit of anyone who may not have been present at the last Waste Management Board meeting, I'll summarize what's included in this final regulation and how it was developed. The Regulatory Advisory Panel for this action included participants from DEQ, the State Fire Marshal's Office, Department of Forestry, Virginia Nursery and Landscape Association, JCH Environmental, and Farm Bureau. And in an effort to avoid reinventing the wheel, the Regulatory Advisory Panel developed criteria for this new open burning exemption using language and requirements from existing fire safety and open burning regulations, heavily leaning on the statewide fire prevention code, existing solid waste regulations, the existing Air Board's open burning regulations, and VDOT's best practices for open burning of vegetative debris. The conditions for the new exemption can be found as an attachment to your board memo. A new subdivision H was added to section 95D15 of the regulations, and it establishes conditions applicable to off-site properties where a vegetative waste would be stored and burned. Again, this will allow clean wood waste to be transported to another property to be open burned when it's impractical or unsafe to burn it on site, and that burning would not require a solid waste permit as long as these conditions are followed. The first condition of the exemption is that the wood waste must be stored in accordance with the existing regulations. These are not new. We're just referencing the regulations and the provision where they are outlined. And some of the existing requirements for wood storage at sites that do not have a solid waste permit include keeping brush to no more than 1/3 of an acre in size and no more than 15 feet in height. The brush pile should be stored at least 50 feet from structures, trees, water bodies, property lines. It can't be on a steep slope, cause discharges, or attract insects or rodents that carry disease. The new open burning exemption would limit the burning when it's off-site to no more than once every 60 days for no more than 72 hours at a time. This ensures that the burning can be done only on an infrequent basis, which is important because continuous and frequent burning may be grounds for considering a property to be an open dump under the federal and state solid waste regulations. The new exemption also requires that no more than 100 cubic yards of brush can be burned at one time when it's off-site. And that 100 cubic yard size is a size that is used in other sections of the solid waste regulations for exemptions, and it's intended to keep activities small scale so that a solid waste permit is not needed. Notification to the fire marshal ahead of time is also required, consistent with the fire prevention code, and adherence to other state regulations and local ordinances would be required. The off-site burning itself would also need to adhere to certain setbacks from buildings, roads, wells, water bodies, property lines, tree lines, utilities, and combustible materials. And these setbacks were agreed to by the Regulatory Advisory Panel for consistency with best practices, existing open burning standards. They should minimize the potential for fire safety and air quality concerns and hopefully prevent complaints from neighboring properties. Under this exemption, off-site open burning of vegetative waste would not be allowed in volatile organic compound or VOC emissions control areas, which are highlighted on the map. This is because the State Air Pollution Control Board regulations don't already allow for routine off-site open burning of vegetative waste in these areas due to existing air pollution issues. And lastly, as part of the new exemption, additional standards are provided for fire safety and air quality controls, such as attending the fire at all times, having a method to extinguish the fire if it becomes too windy or there's an air quality alert in the area, or if smoke begins to impair visibility on nearby roads. No liquid accelerants such as diesel fuel, gasoline, or motor oil can be used to start or maintain the fire, and no other materials like trash or building debris can be burned, just clean brush. These requirements were agreed to for consistency with existing standards in the Fire Prevention Code. As a reminder, the proposed regulation that I just went through was published for a 60-day public comment that ended this October. There were no public comments received, so DEQ made no changes to the proposed regulation, and we're carrying the language forward for a final regulation for your consideration. So I'll pause here for any questions before I provide a staff recommendation.
Anyone have any questions?
All right. If there's no questions, then the staff recommends that the board adopt the amendment in response to Chapter 235 of the 2024 Virginia Acts of Assembly to the Virginia Solid Waste Management Regulations 9 VAC 2081 as a final regulation.
Would anyone like to make a motion in accordance with staff recommendation?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? So moved.
Thank you.
The next order of business is item 7, the withdrawal of final regulations, Amendment 9, Solid Waste Management Regulations, 9 VAC 20-81.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the board. It's wonderful to see you all here today. I'm Stephanie Talon, the Secretary of Natural and Historic Resources. First, thank you for your service and thank you for making the trip today. Hopefully the roads were not too treacherous coming from each of your homes. I know it was touch and go for a little bit there yesterday, so certainly appreciate you all taking the time and making the trip here today. I also appreciate the opportunity to be in front of you here to present agenda item number 7, withdrawal of final regulations, Amendment 9, Solid Waste Management Regulations, 9 VAC 20-81. The regulations have been under executive review, which is something we take very seriously in our office. And upon reaching our desk, we conducted a very thorough review of the regulations. And while there are very minor clarifications included, the bulk of the regulation is comprised of significant discretionary changes. Amendment 9 included provisions related to landfill siting and setbacks, landfill operations, landfill gas monitoring, landfill groundwater monitoring, and open and burning exemptions. To provide an overview of the most significant changes, first, the regulation increases setback distance from waste management boundary to facility boundary from 50 feet to 100 feet. It increases distance from waste management boundary to certain facilities from 200 feet to 500 feet. The regulation adds a requirement for a periodic topographic survey every 12 months for facilities processing more than 300 tons of garbage per day and every 24 months for facilities processing less. It adds a requirement for a weekly cover to be applied over exposed waste at active industrial landfills and to involve 6-inch impacted soil cover. The regulation also adds new methane reporting and monitoring requirements. The regulation increases the number of samples that must be taken at off-site wells from 4 to 8 and specifies minimum requirements for maintaining groundwater wells. It also adds a placeholder for emerging contaminants such as PFAS to be added to routine groundwater monitoring pending establishment of MCLs. It eliminates the existing allowance for citizens to burn waste on their property if regularly scheduled collection services are not available on the adjacent road, limiting permissible burning to vegetative waste, clean wood, and clean paper products. There are several reasons why it is appropriate to withdraw Amendment 9 at this time. As a whole, Amendment 9 includes discretionary changes that are unnecessary and do not further protect public health and the environment. The changes were driven by a 2018 executive order, not statutory requirements. The changes impact areas of local government authority, specifically changes to landfill siting and setbacks, as well as prohibiting open burning of household waste, are changes that can limit local government authorities regarding land use decisions and solid waste management planning. Additionally, local governments are charged with developing, implementing, and maintaining solid waste management plans that outline the available facilities and waste management strategies for their residents and businesses. Localities can also choose to further limit or prohibit open burning through local ordinance. The changes address criteria that have since been subject to subsequent legislative actions. At the time when Amendment 9 was presented, Virginia did not have legislation for PFAS, but this has since been incorporated into state law. The Virginia Department of Health is required to notify DEQ of detection of PFAS in finished water from public water systems above established MCLs, and subsequently for DEQ to develop a priority plan for PFAS assessment to identify source of PFAS in public water systems, public water raw water sources. Since PFAS work is now directed under the legislation, these Amendment 9 changes do not conform and are unnecessary. Many changes can also be individually addressed in solid waste permits under existing permitting authority in lieu of broad brush regulatory change. The Virginia Solid Waste Management regulations already authorize DEQ to include conditions that are necessary to protect public health or the environment or to ensure compliance with the regulations. This authority can be used to ensure facilities that are struggling with compliance have additional requirements added to their permits to ensure protection of neighboring properties. And it's important to note that DEQ does use this existing authority. The agency has previously added annual topographic survey requirements to solid waste permits for active landfills, first in response to a compliance violation, and subsequently additional landfills have received this requirement in their permit to ensure accurate landfill capacity is being monitored and reported. And finally, these prescriptive changes would result in a cost of at least $20.7 million annually to the waste industry, which we view as unnecessarily burdensome. For these reasons, I recommend the board withdraw the action Amendment 9 to the Virginia Solid Waste Management Regulations 9 VAC 20-81. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Does anyone have any questions?
No, ma'am.
Do we open for public comment?
Yes. Randy, public comment.
There's actually no speakers.
Did anyone? Okay, so there are no speakers?
No speakers.
So no public comments?
No public comments on this, and no one signed up for the forum when we get there at this point either.
Okay. We
So you asked for a motion now.
ask for a motion. Do you want to say anything? Does anyone want to, any comments or questions or?
We'll motion, then
Or we'll
then
just.
comment.
Okay.
Yeah, there we go.
There you go.
Yeah,
Sorry.
so, Madam Chair, I'll motion to withdraw Amendment 9 as per the Secretary's recommendation.
I'll second that.
Any comments?
Any comments, any discussion?
I do. As I was initially on the board, my first board meeting was when we actually voted to approve Amendment 9. I did want to make a comment that 3 years ago I voted for it without kind of fully grasping the operational impacts on Virginia's landfill industry. Since then, my experience has shown that these regulatory changes are unnecessary and do not better protect public health or the environment. The existing permitting framework already allows DEQ to address these concerns effectively on a case-by-case basis. and I support withdrawing Amendment 9 and believe the current regulatory framework serves the Commonwealth well.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions or discussion?
Madam Chair, if I may,
Yes.
could Mr. Chesla confirm that his recommendation is to withdraw the action Amendment 9 to the Virginia Solid Waste Management Regulations, non-BAC 20-81?
Yes, that's it. Yes.
All right, yes.
I have
Go
just
ahead.
a quick question.
Mhm.
Is there anything that prohibits any of this from coming back into play in the future?
No, there's not. And as I mentioned in my earlier remarks, there were some minor clarifications that could perhaps be beneficial. And so it would certainly be an option for the board to bring this back up and do things perhaps a little bit more measured going forward.
Thank you.
Call for the vote.
I don't think we have a second.
Joe was.
Oh, second, did you second? I'm glad y'all are keeping track. All right, so all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is the Division Director report from DEQ.
Thank you, and good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the board. My name is Catherine Perzik. I am the Director of Land Protection and Revitalization here at DEQ, and I will present the Director's report. So as in typical fashion, for at least one of our annual board meetings, I speak to just the solid and hazardous waste program status, give you some updates on our voluntary remediation and brownfields programs, both of which are under the purview of this board with regulations. And then I thought I would highlight the progress on our Swiffer grant projects. So first up, for our solid waste universe, really this hasn't changed much with respect to the active number of facilities. We have had a few recent closures or facilities that are transitioning from they've stopped accepting waste and are still continuing to final closure construction for our landfill universe. And based on our calendar year 2024 data, I just wanted to point out our current solid waste capacity for each of those landfill types. But otherwise, our universe is fairly consistent. And then as well as part of the calendar year 2024 data, you can see that majority of Virginia's waste is managed via landfill. 10% is incinerated, 6% is indicated as recycled on or off-site of our permitted solid waste management facilities, and then composted and mulched, others, and stored. And that's basically just based off our solid waste information and assessment reports done by our permitted facilities. As far as our solid waste permitting activities, they have been kept busy. I have both on the screen our fiscal year 2025. This is based on the state fiscal year, so July 1 to June 30th. What permitting approvals were done throughout the year, and then what we currently have pending in process. So our permit writers in each of our regions are continuing to be busy processing both landfill and solid waste management facility permit applications. And you too and everybody out there can keep track on any of our pending solid waste permit projects using our PEEP portal. So you can search for all of our solid waste permit activities, and this is a smattering of where our current pending modifications are in process across the state. And then we're using that data and information on the back end to track that DEQ staff are processing permit applications within our target schedules. And this just provides some more transparency on our end. What you're seeing here is in the gray bar is the allotted time for permit actions, and then the blue is just the DEQ processing time. So we were doing a fairly decent job. We've had a few slip-ups there, here and there, but overall it looks fine as we've had some staffing. You know, people leave, people come, but we're continuing to keep up with that workload. On the solid waste compliance end, our staff were able to do 707 compliance inspections for the year. 677 of those were for on-site inspections, whereas 30 were for record reviews. I thought it interesting to note that about 60% of our compliance inspections are done at our solid waste disposal facilities or our coal combustion residual impoundments, and 40% are at our management facilities, our transfer stations, MRFs, compost facilities, and the like. And as far as compliance history, we tend to see that about 82% of our facilities are in compliance when DEQ inspectors show up, which is great. And then you can see there that some inspections do result in a deficiency letter noting areas where a facility needs to make corrections, warning letters or notice of violation, and referrals to enforcement. Also, an update for calendar year 2024 data. We receive recycling rate reports from localities, and 2024 was the year, just like 2020, where all localities were required to report their recycling rate information. And we are seeing a decline in recycling rates, and I'm sure as you guys working in the industry are aware, there are just struggles with collection programs and finding homes for market materials. But we'll talk about the solid waste management plan in a little bit too, and so that's hopefully a direction for us to try to get those numbers back up. I also wanted to touch on House Resolution 448 from the 2025 session. While DEQ does work with a separate litter control and recycling fund advisory board, DEQ was tasked with this resolution to study tax policy options for reforming the litter tax and considering how the litter tax could better promote recycling, reduce landfill waste, and advance environmental stewardship in the Commonwealth. For this effort, DEQ established a litter tax study group, which includes a member of the Litter Control and Recycling Fund Advisory Board and a local litter tax recipient, as well as environmental groups, industry representatives, and other entities that currently pay the litter tax. And public and private recycling and waste industry representatives are all within that group. We were able to meet on September 16th and discuss the resolution, which, in addition to sort of asking us to study and provide policy options, asked for analyses and reporting around solid waste streams and the costs and revenues of disposal, our recycling streams, analysis and looking at market conditions and economic opportunities within the recycling industry, as well as the current efficacy of that litter tax, and to look at whether it was appropriate to add a cigarette fee that went to the litter tax or litter fund, and whether it was appropriate for any small business exemptions. So this resolution requires 2 reports, both of which are due the first day of the General Assembly for the 2026 and 2027 sessions. That report has been prepared and is working through its review. I also wanted to touch on our state CCR permit program process. I mentioned in May at our board meeting that Virginia continues to push forward with preparing and seeking approval from EPA for our CCR, or coal combustion residuals permitting actions. EPA this year did announce that they are really trying to push for states to have permit primacy or permit authority for these facilities. And I'm happy to report that North Dakota earlier this year just got their approval, and Wyoming's is in process. And as far as Virginia's goes, we did submit our package back in June, and in September received comments from EPA. I was hoping that instead of soon, I was going to have a date that I would have submitted back our responses, but we are working on our revisions to their comments. Some of them are very minor. A few things take a little more coordination. But we anticipate resubmitting a revised application for that efforts to get hopefully EPA's approval of our permitting actions. Switching gears to our hazardous waste facility, I thought I'd just throw a couple of numbers up for your reference. Our hazardous waste facility universe is a combination of facilities, so we have both federal and private treatment, storage, and disposal facilities. We have land disposal facilities, or those that are in post-closure care from historic hazardous waste management activities. We have large quantity generators and small and very small quantity generators. Those are all categories based on the quantities of waste generated within a time frame and material stored, and have very specific generator requirements around them. But I just wanted to reflect these numbers because it shows that we have largely a lot of businesses, right, that manage hazardous waste, and that is who we are targeting with some of our inspections of generators. So speaking of generators and our compliance activities, if you were quick on there, you'll note that the universe number is slightly different. That's because each year we, based on reporting, have a slightly different quantity of large quantity generators or those small or very small quantity generators, but the rest of our facility remains the same. Our hazardous waste program is under a work plan with EPA as we receive federal grant dollars to run our hazardous waste compliance and permitting programs. And with that comes certain commitments to complete a certain number of inspections of different types of facilities on an annual basis. And so I was just presenting you here what our commitment is and what we've completed. Happy to report that we completed a few more than what our commitment was for federal fiscal year 25. And you can also see there our compliance record for when the hazardous waste inspector shows up at a facility. We're seeing roughly 36% in compliance when DEQ shows up, with 36% needing informal resolution, so similar to a deficiency letter, and then the fraction there for warning letters and NOVs. On permitting and corrective action, so this is where the numbers, if you're really trying to track, maybe don't try, but for treatment, storage, and disposal permits, those facilities that are at DEQ, or they're in Virginia that require permits, we have 33 of them. And our permit writers here in central office handled 1 renewal of a permit and 5 modifications. We also track and manage what are referred to as the RCRA corrective action sites. And actually, EPA has rebranded that as cleanup sites, but we still have it as corrective action in our program. We have 122 of those, which is what you're seeing on the map. This is a map available through our GIS. So you can see the facility boundaries, and then that orange is the control boundary for managing contaminated groundwater or units at the site that have hazardous waste disposed. And of those 122 RCRA corrective action sites, 25 of them are part of that 33 permitted universe. Others are managed through letters of agreement or some other form of mechanism to require cleanup and or management of hazardous waste that remains on site at a facility. EPA has metrics, again, within that work plan that speak to having human exposure controlled, and so I'm happy to report that 100% of our RCRA corrective action sites have human exposure controlled, 98% have groundwater migration controlled, which means we're not having any groundwater contamination leave a site, and then final remedy constructed at 94% of our sites. Shifting again to our voluntary remediation program, another map for your viewing pleasure. This is a very successful program, as this is where remediation or cleanup may not be specifically mandated by, like RCRA corrective action or our solid waste program, but entities elect to clean up a property and they get DEQ oversight for risk-based cleanup. Over the history of the program, we have issued 515 certificates, and that addresses over 8,000 acres of property that has been cleaned up and or redeveloped through the VRP program, and we have 111 projects currently enrolled. As far as the types of properties that tend to get cleaned up through the voluntary remediation program, it's predominantly industrial sites, but also a large component are dry cleaner and land disposal facilities, and you can see the rest there on the pie chart. And for fiscal year 2025, we did have 18 new sites applied. That's a little low for us. Normally we're in the 24 or so sites per year, so we recognize that the economy can influence how many sites are coming in for redevelopment. But we were able to issue 28 VRP certificates that address 372 acres. Our VRP program folks have also put out some new resources on our website, sort of showing the process of a voluntary remediation project from initial eligibility determination to doing the various analyses, your phase 1, phase 2, site characterization, learning all of the detailed information about any contamination present and cleanup plans through construction and certification, and we have provided a checklist. Switching over to brownfield comfort letters. For a while, and the reason why the chart has 2021 is we had to stop doing comfort letters due to lack of staff resources at the time, and we restarted those in September of 2022. And I don't think this is a metric I was able to highlight before, but when staff presented me some information, we used to be taking over 30 days to review those, and while I think our written timeline is like a 60-day turnaround, we're really doing them in about 10. So I thought that was a huge accomplishment for staff who are working on those. We have done 916 letters to date addressing 21,000 acres of property, noting them as brownfields, which helps them look towards redevelopment with grant eligibility, and also, well, it's mostly grant eligibility for that, but it also helps with property transfer, because the person who wants to buy a property for redevelopment may need this letter to help get their loan at the bank or move forward, because it's noting that they're not responsible. They still need to take appropriate care, but they're maybe not responsible for having caused any contamination. Brownfields has also put out a few new things this year. One was a Brownfield Success Stories story map that's available on our website. You can see there's I think 14 projects highlighted for each of those push pins that you can see on the map, and you can cycle through those to give ideas for local governments for other successful projects in the Commonwealth. We also published a economic impact analysis. We looked at the grants that are offered through the Brownfields Restoration Economic Development Assistance Fund, or VBAF, and those use site assessment and those offer site assessment and remediation grants. This is a VEDP program, but they work with our DEQ Brownfields coordinators to review sites and site eligibility. And they basically looked at a $9.6 million in grants that were awarded to different sites, and analyzed a number of jobs created and economic output, and found that through those grant awards, where basically looked at completed projects, over 1,600 new jobs had been created. There was an increase in economic output of $264 million, and the real estate value increased on these projects over $960 million in collective. Just a plug here, our Brownfields folks tend to do an annual conference, so our next conference is already on the books for June 8th through 10th in Stanton. Our conferences typically include mobile workshops. They highlight projects that have happened and provide technical sessions. All right, the final piece of my director's update is just to reference the Solid Waste Infrastructure for Recycling grant. For those who've been here before, you've seen a couple of these slides, so pardon the repeat, but these were grant funding provided by EPA. This is the first time EPA provided states funding to improve post-consumer materials management programs. DEQ's projects, Swiffer projects, were twofold. We had one to develop a statewide solid waste management plan, and one to develop a recycling data collection and analysis application. And I did update our recycling rate at 39.5%, but some of the goal behind this is to get states to the EPA's goal of 50% recycling by 2030. So our first project, or I guess just some background, Virginia's current solid waste management plan is from 1979. And the structure in Virginia really has been, since this plan, is that localities and solid waste planning units, as directed by legislation, are charged with solid waste planning. And that's what Virginia has really relied on in lieu of this 1979 plan. This 1979 plan did have a state focus of closing open dumps, developing expanded solid waste rules and regulations, and preparing guidelines for local and regional solid waste management plans. The timing of this and the timing of the federal and state regulations all sort of coincide, which is what that plan focused on. So with our new state solid waste management plan, we're looking at a proposed planning period of 2026 to 2046, and we're looking at advancing post-consumer materials management in progress towards EPA's national recycling and food loss and waste reduction goals. Those are sort of the requirements of the Swiffer grant, and then also to reflect the current needs of industry and serve as a roadmap for the future in Virginia. So where we are on the development timeline, we received the award back in 2023. Took us a while to get our hands around how are we dealing with this money, and we issued a RFP and got a contract in place in late 2024. And we've had the contractor RRS, who developed the solid waste management plan for us. They provided that to us in November, and we got it published for public comment, which we are currently in the public comment period for. And we anticipate that the Waste Board at a future date will have an opportunity to approve the final solid waste management plan. But to step back a little bit for what's went into preparing the state solid waste management plan, RRS basically looked at a lot of past reports. DEQ, through resolutions and other legislation, has been tasked with doing studies and convening working groups. And so they looked at the past reports of the Waste Diversion Recycling Task Force, the Plastics Advisory Council, as well as the CPRG Climate Action Plan that was published for another grant opportunity for DEQ. They looked at our current regulations and statutes. They looked at mapping our existing facilities and any other available data like our recycling data and our solid waste information assessment data. And then they sort of identified through a gap analysis, policy, financial, technical needs for Virginia, and that was somewhat informed by neighboring state solid waste management plans and their statutes and regulations to give a comparison point. We did have public input going into the draft development, so we held a stakeholder session with RRS back in March of this year, and the discussion centered on the opportunity that this plan presented or provided with the transition from the 1979 plan, sort of that one's done, what needs to be in a plan for Virginia going forward. And then what's been presented is the draft solid waste management plan that is currently published on our website and available for public comment. It includes an introduction, which really speaks to Virginia's current demographics, provides the history and overview of Virginia's solid waste systems, and has data about waste managed in Virginia. Chapter 2 provides an overview of the existing waste management systems in Virginia and includes desktop analyses of community access to recycling, food waste collection, yard waste collection, and household hazardous waste collection for communities across each of DEQ's regions. There are also geographic representations of our material processing and recycling facilities beyond DEQ's permitted solid waste universe. Chapter 3 carries over the types of information from the 1979 plan and describes DEQ's permitting, compliance, enforcement, data, reporting, all of those functions that DEQ does within the solid waste space. Chapter 4 introduces the idea of circular economy and product stewardship. Chapter 5, which provides a menu of key actions and recommendations for the future, which I'll spend a few more minutes on the next slide. And then the remaining chapters sort of wrap up the plan and provide placeholders for filling out for public comments that we receive, and once the plan is finalized for the future. So Chapter 5 includes the key actions and recommendations, and these are based on our contractor RRS's review of DEQ's current policies, plans, and programs, where they identified several gaps and areas for improvement or expansion of current programs. Specifically, they fall into the general categories of governance, advancing waste reduction, growing the circular economy, developing infrastructure and optimizing material recovery, managing special waste streams, which is like electronics, household hazardous waste, pharmaceuticals, tires, solar panels, educating and engaging with the public, and improving preparedness for natural disaster debris. The action items under each area focus on administrative, legal, financial, and technical areas and refer to specific policies, plans, and programs with areas for improvement, including solid waste reporting, waste composition data, forecasting, and Virginia State Code updates for clarification. So where we are on the plan, I mentioned we're currently in an open public comment period for this draft plan. That closes on December 19th. DEQ will then assess the public comments received and work with RRS, who will provide sort of what I'm considering a draft final of the solid waste management plan in January. And then, as noted in the existing Waste Management Act, it is the board's duty to develop and keep current a solid waste management plan. So a draft final will come back to the board at some point for your consideration and hopeful adoption. Our second project is an online recycling rate reporting application. For those who have local government experience, you'll know that local governments submit an Excel spreadsheet to DEQ either annually or every 4 years, depending on their size. And that requires a lot of manual coordination on DEQ's end, especially every time there's an updated spreadsheet. We have to pull that data over, and it's cumbersome. So we were looking to have an online application. So that project kicked off in May. We did project design and development over the summer with system testing and finalization. We were all good as of October. And so this new online reporting tool will be available for the calendar year 2025 recycling rate reporting. And basically what we have done is added an additional form to our existing DEQ portal, and our local governments will be given access to the given amended access to the portal so that this form is available to them. And then all of their principal recyclable materials will be able to be entered into this, and then on the back end, all of that data is put together, saving a huge amount of staff time. I will stop there for questions.
Any questions?
Not a question, but a comment. Looking at PEEP and the results of PEEP, I remember 3 years ago when Mike, you and Catherine were kind of talking about the vision of what PEEP was going to look like. I don't think we could have expected it to go as well as it did. The reduction in time for permitting and stuff like that has been amazing, and I know the industry truly appreciates that faster response coming from DEQ, and I just wanted to give you guys kudos. I know you got a lot, but for me, I think it's important that really appreciate that hard work.
Wow. I wanted to point out what you saw with Catherine presented today is it's her entire division and all of DEQ, but each division has just taken it on. It's not just PEEP, it's just everything they're doing to make things more efficient and more timely. Just this little thing with trying to get the recycling data, it was a pain to add it all together, and it just wasn't set up that way. So now we're just automating everything, and the goal is to be able to be more responsive to people, and which they are. I mean, some of those brownfield requirements, I get a couple of emergency calls.
Those comfort letters, 70% reduction is amazing.
Yeah, well, and sometimes 10 days the average. She's turning around the same day sometimes. We get a call from economic development, it's an emergency, and it's just done. And that was not happening. And that was actually a pet peeve of mine when I came here, remember? Because I had some people complaining to me about it before I got here. But she was able to basically reallocate workload because we didn't have enough money and resources. But what we've been doing is trying to focus on things that could make a big difference, and then that frees up more resources to do other things. So it's been phenomenal.
Well, thank you. That's great.
Any other comments, questions?
On the recycling rate, the dip in the recycling rate, did you notice, was there any particular commodity? I mean, since everything's measured in weight, I guess, was there any, or have you delved into it
I have
that
to go back and look.
deeply?
We were able to just get that report up on DEQ's website, so that is available now. I certainly didn't look at that more closely. We did have a few localities not report, so that plays into, I think, some of it as well, given that the requirement is every 4 years for many of our localities. We struggled to get some data in, and at some point it was just sort of like we need to publish the report, so we got the report published.
Gotcha.
But I'm not sure if it's tied to any particular materials or reductions. I'll have to look.
Okay. Thanks.
Well, I would like to say that was a plethora of information, and
Yeah.
thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for your presentation.
Yeah, no problem.
No speakers for public forum.
No speakers for the public forum. Future meetings.
At this point, we do not have a meeting scheduled. I will be in touch when this time scheduled one.
Do I have to do a motion for to adjourn, or no?
Well, is there a time frame for approval of the solid waste plan?
No?
There's not a hard deadline.
Not a hard, okay. Just curious.
Then, I will
Madam Chair,
take a
motion to adjourn.
Second.
I assume there is no objections. So moved. Adjourned. Thank you.